What's going on, everyone? And welcome back. You've finally reached max level in Project Ascension, Conquest of Azeroth. Congratulations. But now you're probably wondering, what comes next? For most players, the answer is simple. Mythic Dungeons, Raids, and the real Endgame. The problem is that reaching max level is only half the journey. Every day I see players jump straight into difficult content completely unprepared. They don't know their rotation. Their gear isn't optimized. They forget consumables. They haven't looked at the boss mechanics. And then they wonder why the group keeps wiping. The good news is that preparing for Endgame isn't nearly as complicated as it seems. You don't need perfect gear. You don't need to know every mechanic by heart. And you definitely don't need to be the highest item level on the server. You simply need to prepare the right way. In this guide, I'm going to walk you through everything you should do before stepping into your first Mythic Dungeon or Raid. We'll cover gearing, talents, consumables, UI setup, group expectations, and several mistakes that almost every new player makes. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to get your character ready for endgame and avoid becoming the player nobody wants to invite back. Let's jump right in. Step 1. Choose the right specialization. Before worrying about gear or item level, you need to make sure you're playing a specialization that you're actually comfortable with. One of the biggest mistakes new players make is constantly swapping specs because they saw a tier list online. A specialization might be considered S tier. That doesn't automatically mean you'll perform well with it. If you've spent the last 20 hours leveling as one specialization, you probably understand that rotation much better than another spec you've never touched before. Confidence matters. Experience matters. Knowing your cooldowns matters. A player who understands an A-tier specialization will almost always outperform someone who barely understands an S-tier one. Another thing to think about is your role. Are you playing DPS, tank, or healer? Each role comes with different responsibilities. If you're tanking, you're responsible for controlling pulls, positioning enemies, and often leading the pace of the dungeon. That's a lot of responsibility. If you're healing, your job isn't simply keeping health bars full. You'll also need to manage mana efficiently, recognize incoming damage, and know when to use your major cooldowns. For DPS players, your focus is maximizing damage while staying alive. That last part is more important than many people realize. Dead players don't contribute damage, no matter how good your build is. Spend time becoming comfortable with your specialization before worrying about squeezing out a few extra percentage points of damage. Step 2. Learn your rotation. This might sound obvious, but simply reading your abilities isn't enough. You need to understand how they work together. A proper rotation isn't just pressing abilities whenever they become available. It's about priorities. Which abilities should you always use first? Which cooldowns should be paired together? Which attacks should never be delayed? These questions become incredibly important during in-game content. One exercise I always recommend is spending some time practicing outside of raids. Fight world enemies. Run normal dungeons. Experiment with different ability combinations. The goal is to make your rotation feel natural. When difficult mechanics start happening during a raid, you shouldn't be thinking about which button comes next. Your muscle memory should already know. That frees your attention for the mechanics that actually wipe groups. The better your fundamentals are, the easier every encounter becomes. Step 3. Understand your role beyond damage. This is something that separates average players from great ones. Great players understand that their job isn't just to top the damage meter. It's to help the group succeed. Interrupt dangerous casts. Use defensive cooldowns before massive damage. Help resurrect fallen teammates when possible. Avoid standing in avoidable mechanics. Use crowd control when needed. If everyone focuses only on their personal damage, groups quickly fall apart. The best Mythic and Raid players are the ones who make everyone else's job easier. That mindset alone will make you a much more valuable teammate. Step 4. Set realistic expectations, 10 to 11 o'clock. Finally, before you even enter your first Mythic Dungeon or Raid, understand that mistakes are going to happen. You're going to miss mechanics. You'll occasionally die. Some groups will wipe. That's completely normal. Every experienced player has been there. The important thing isn't avoiding every mistake. It's learning from each one. Instead of asking, who caused the wipe? Ask, what can I personally do better next pull? That mentality leads to improvement much faster than blaming teammates. Now that your mindset is in the right place, it's time to start preparing your character itself. Because even the most skilled player still needs proper gear, consumables, talents, and a few important tools before stepping into serious endgame content. Let's cover all of that next. Step 5. Gear up the right way. Now that you're comfortable with your class, it's time to start preparing your gear. One mistake I see all the time is players becoming obsessed with item level. They'll equip a higher item level piece simply because the number is bigger, without paying attention to whether the stats actually benefit their specialization. Here's the reality. Item level is important, but it's only one part of the equation. The right secondary stats can often provide a bigger increase than blindly equipping the highest level item you own. Take some time to understand what your specialization actually benefits from. Does your class value critical strike? Maybe haste makes your rotation much smoother. Or perhaps mastery dramatically increases your overall damage. Knowing what your class wants allows you to make smarter gearing decisions instead of simply chasing bigger numbers. Another thing I recommend is replacing weak gear gradually. You don't need every slot to be perfect before stepping into Mythic Dungeons. Focus on consistent upgrades. Complete world activities. Run normal and heroic dungeons. Finish weekly objectives. Before you know it, your character will naturally become strong enough for much harder content. Patience is key. Trying to skip the gearing process usually creates far more frustration than simply progressing naturally. Step 6. Never ignore consumables. Consumables are one of the easiest ways to improve your performance. And surprisingly, they're also one of the most overlooked. A simple flask, a food buff, or a potion can provide a meaningful increase to your damage, healing, or survivability. Now imagine 20 players entering a raid. 19 of them come fully prepared. One player doesn't. That difference might not seem huge. But over the course of an entire raid, those small advantages add up quickly. Good guilds notice those details. Even if you're joining a casual group, showing up prepared demonstrates that you respect everyone else's time. It's a small investment that makes a big difference. Another thing worth mentioning is weapon enhancements. Many players remember food and flasks but completely forget temporary weapon buffs. Always double-check before pulling a boss. Developing that habit early will save you from countless embarrassing moments later. Step 7. Optimize your talents. Your talents should never stay exactly the same forever. One build might be fantastic for single-target raid bosses. The next encounter might reward heavy AoE damage instead. Some fights require extra survivability. Others reward additional mobility. The best players adjust their talents depending on the content they're running. That doesn't mean you need to copy every build you see online. Understanding why certain talents are chosen is much more valuable than blindly copying them. Ask yourself questions like, does this dungeon have lots of trash packs? Do I need stronger defensive cooldowns? Will this boss survive long enough for sustained damage talents to become valuable? Once you begin thinking this way, your performance naturally improves. Talents become another tool, not just something you selected weeks ago and forgot about. Step 8. Build a comfortable user interface. This might not sound exciting, but your user interface can have a huge impact on your gameplay. If important cooldowns are hidden, if your action bars are difficult to read, or if enemy mechanics get buried under unnecessary visual clutter, you're making the game harder than it needs to be. Take some time before entering difficult content to organize everything. Place your most important abilities somewhere easy to see. Make defensive cooldowns obvious. Keep interrupt abilities accessible. Arrange your action bars in a way that feels natural for you. The goal isn't creating the fanciest UI possible. The goal is making information easy to understand during stressful moments. The less time you spend searching your screen, the more attention you can dedicate to mechanics. Step 9. Learn boss mechanics before entering. Here's one of the easiest ways to improve your success rate. Spend 5 minutes learning the encounter before you walk into it. Seriously, 5 minutes. You don't need to memorize every single mechanic. You don't need to watch an hour-long guide. Just learn the basics. What abilities are dangerous? When should you use defensive cooldowns? Are there positioning requirements? Does the boss have multiple phases? Understanding even a handful of mechanics makes an enormous difference. Instead of reacting with panic, you'll recognize what's happening. That confidence alone dramatically improves your performance. Remember, Preparation outside the dungeon often saves much more time than repeatedly wiping inside it. Step 10. Communication wins runs. One of the biggest differences between average groups and great groups isn't gear. It's communication. You don't need to be talking every second, but simple callouts make encounters much smoother. If you're the tank, let the group know how large your pulls will be. If you're the healer and a major cooldown isn't available, mention it. If you're a DPS assigned to interrupt a dangerous cast, communicate clearly. Good communication prevents confusion before it happens. Even in random groups, being polite and communicating important information creates a much better atmosphere. People are far more patient with someone who's trying to work with the team than someone who stays silent and ignores mechanics. At this point, your character is geared. Your talents are optimized. Your consumables are ready. You've learned the encounters. You're almost ready for Mythic Dungeons and Raids. But before we finish, let's talk about the mistakes that stop so many players from succeeding once they finally reach Endgame. Because avoiding these mistakes can improve your performance just as much as getting better gear. The 10 biggest Mythic and Raid mistakes players make. Now that your character is ready, let's talk about something that's just as important as gear. The mistakes that wipe groups. These are the habits that separate experienced players from those who constantly struggle in endgame content. Mistake number 1. Standing in avoidable mechanics. Let's start with the most obvious one. Damage dealers often become so focused on their rotation that they completely ignore what's happening around them. You might gain one extra ability by standing still, but if that decision gets you killed, you've lost far more damage than you gained. One simple rule can dramatically improve your performance. Always prioritize mechanics over damage. A player doing slightly less DPS while staying alive is infinitely more valuable than someone topping the meters for 30 seconds before dying. Remember, dead players don't finish boss fights. Mistake number 2. Saving every cooldown. This happens surprisingly often. Players hold on to their strongest cooldowns because they're waiting for the perfect moment. Sometimes, that perfect moment never comes. Cooldowns exist to be used. The goal isn't using them randomly, but also not being afraid to press them. Learning when to use offensive and defensive cooldowns is one of the biggest improvements you can make. Mistake number 3. Ignoring defensive abilities. A lot of players think defensives are only for tanks. That's simply not true. Every class has tools designed to help survive dangerous mechanics. Using a defensive cooldown before a massive attack can completely change an encounter. Great players don't only maximize damage, they maximize survival. Mistake number 4. Tunnel vision. It's easy to become obsessed with your action bars. But endgame content requires awareness. Keep an eye on boss positioning, enemy casts, ground effects, your teammates, and your own cooldown timers. The more information you process during combat, the better your decisions become. Mistake number 5. Panicking after one death. Everyone dies. Even the best players. What matters is how you respond. Instead of getting frustrated, ask yourself, what killed me? Could I have avoided it? Should I use a defensive cooldown next time? That mindset leads to improvement much faster than blaming bad luck. Mistake number 6. Chasing the damage meter. This is probably one of the biggest traps in MMORPGs. Many players care more about finishing first on the damage meter than actually helping the group. Sometimes interrupting an important cast is more valuable than squeezing in another attack. Sometimes moving away from danger lowers your damage. That's okay. Raid leaders remember reliable players, not players who ignored mechanics just to increase their numbers. Mistake number 7. Not asking questions. If you're unsure about a mechanic, ask. Most groups would rather spend 30 seconds explaining something than wipe several times because someone stayed silent. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being new. The willingness to learn is always appreciated. Mistake number 8. Giving up too early. Some groups wipe once and immediately fall apart. Progression doesn't work like that. Every wipe teaches you something. Every pull gives your team more information. The best raid teams aren't the ones that never fail. They're the ones that keep improving after every attempt. Mistake number 9. Arriving unprepared. Nothing frustrates groups more than players showing up without repairs, food, flasks, or knowledge of basic mechanics. Preparation demonstrates respect for everyone else's time. 5 minutes of preparation before a raid can easily save 30 minutes inside it. Mistake number 10, forgetting to enjoy the game. This might sound strange in a preparation guide, but it's important. Endgame can become very competitive. People chase item level, damage rankings, perfect parses. While improvement is great, don't forget why you're playing. Celebrate upgrades. Enjoy learning encounters. Have fun with your guild. Those experiences are what make MMORPGs memorable. How to become the player every group wants. 27:00, 29:00. Here's something that often surprises newer players. Groups don't always remember the highest DPS. They remember the most reliable player. The one who interrupts dangerous casts. The one who revives teammates without being asked. The one who stays calm after a wipe. The one who arrives prepared every single week. Those are the players who receive invitations again and again. If you want to stand out, focus on being dependable. Be on time. Bring consumables. Know your mechanics. Communicate politely. Avoid unnecessary mistakes. Those habits are worth far more than chasing one extra percentage point of damage. Being a great teammate will always open more doors than simply having the best gear. Before entering any mythic dungeon or raid, ask yourself these questions. Heavy checkmark, is my gear repaired? Heavy checkmark, do I have the right talents selected? Heavy checkmark, have I equipped the correct gear for this encounter? Heavy checkmark, do I have food, flasks, potions, and weapon buffs? Heavy checkmark, do I understand the basic boss mechanics? Heavy checkmark, are my keybinds and UI ready? Heavy checkmark, is my inventory clear enough for loot? Heavy checkmark, have I practiced my rotation recently? Heavy checkmark, am I ready to work with the group instead of focusing only on myself? If you can answer yes to all of those questions, you're ready. Not because your gear is perfect, but because you've prepared properly. And preparation is what separates successful players from everyone else. At the end of the day, Mythic Dungeons and Raids aren't just about stronger gear. They're about becoming a better player. Every boss teaches something new. Every dungeon improves your awareness. Every wipe helps you understand the game a little better. Don't be discouraged if your first few runs feel difficult. Everyone starts somewhere. Even the best players on the server had their first mythic dungeon, their first raid, and their first embarrassing wipe. The important thing is staying patient and continuing to improve. As Conquest of Azeroth continues to receive updates, new encounters, balance changes, and in-game challenges will keep changing the meta. But one thing will never change. Players who prepare well will always have an advantage. If you build good habits now, you'll be ready for whatever content comes next. And that's everything you need to know before stepping into Mythic Dungeons and Raids in Project Ascension, Conquest of Azeroth. If this guide helped you prepare for Endgame, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more Conquest of Azeroth content, including class guides, leveling tips, PvE and PvP tier lists, builds, and future raid guides. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. What's been the biggest challenge you've faced in Mythic Dungeons or Raids so far? Maybe it's gearing, learning mechanics, finding a good group, or just choosing the right class. Let's help each other out. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.